Welcome to Season 2 of the Color Success Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Stephanie J. Wong. Joining us today on the Color Success Podcast is Houston's very own Wushu Lawyer, Mohammed Ullah, aka Momo. Momo is a graduate and proud alum of the University of Houston, graduating with a total of 4 degrees from this flagship institution of the Houston area. Momo is currently a solo practitioner running his own law firm, starting his law practice in the middle of the pandemic. He specializes in estate planning, real estate, business contracts, and small claims litigation. But why is he called the Wushu Lawyer? His title as the Wushu Lawyer stems from his place at the unique intersection of martial arts and the law. Starting Chinese martial arts in his college years, he's managed to cultivate the brand image of his legal practice around this passion. He's here today to discuss a multitude of topics on everything from work-life balance to Asian culture and everything in between. Well, I wanted to welcome Momo to the show. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to come and talk to me.
For sure. I'm really glad to be here. It's been a long time coming. I waited a lot of weeks for this, and I just so excited to talk about what we're going to talk about today.
Absolutely. Well, let's jump right into it. Tell us a little bit about your journey and why are you called the Wushu Lawyer?
So I am a graduate of the University of Houston. I went there for my undergraduate school and grad school and law school. So I was in school for about 7.5 years. And after doing 4 degrees, I finally decided, okay, now I'm going to stop school and finally get to work.
Get a job, dude.
Exactly. Exactly. It's like I can't just be living off my parents forever, right? But I graduated in December 2019. And then after I came back from a small, nice little family trip to Malaysia, then I came back, got sworn into the bar in Texas, and then started the job hunts. Went through multiple interviews, probably at least 9 or 10 that I can remember. And then the coronavirus hits the United States. And so all of a sudden, companies across the country, not just here in Texas, start having hiring freezes. And that includes law firms as well as companies looking to hire inside counsel, nonprofits, so on and so forth. And so I'm left with no fault of my own, not having any job prospects because it's just the mere fact of the COVID economy.
Yeah.
In order to survive, I had no choice but to start my own firm. So interestingly enough, while many people's businesses were under threat or closing down, I actually started my own law firm in about July after actually turning down the one job offer that I did get. And the reason I did turn down that one job offer I got, which interestingly enough would have been the highest paid offer I would have gotten out of all the interviews I went through. It was to go to a firm, but it would have required me to leave Houston, which is my hometown that is near and dear to my heart, and move to San Antonio, which is about 2 to 3 hour drive away.
Yeah.
And then it would require me to work at least 60 hours a week, including nights and weekends. When I mean nights and weekends, I mean it would require me to be beside a phone throughout the night for about 3 to 4 nights a week, at least once or twice every quarter. And there's all these other things that just didn't make that offer right. So I let myself start my own firm and actually for once in my life, invest in myself. And that's how I started my firm, was wanting to take a chance on myself for probably the first time in a long time and not wanting to work for someone else. Even though the normal path for most graduates out of law school is to go work for an organization. I went the other way and I started my own firm straight out of law school as opposed to working for someone else first. I did have some legal experience, but I chose kind of the route that a lot of people would say that it's quite dangerous to choose, but I did it anyway.
Yeah. And I can attest to that. When you go through that much schooling, you're like, I just need to make some money. And so walk me through that vulnerability piece or even the decision-making, because it's easy to pay lip service. Like, oh, I'm going to turn down I'm thinking like maybe a 6-figure salary for where they were going to pay you, or high amount. But walk me through that, because it's easier said than done to say, oh, I'm going to walk away from that stack of money.
Right. So I definitely did not immediately walk away from it, meaning that when I got the offer for that one job that finally did give me an offer in the middle of the pandemic, it was probably early in the morning, about 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning. And I didn't immediately accept. I asked them, can you just give me 24 hours? And so they gave me 24 hours. I spent the better half of that day actually asking all my mentors, asking the people who willingly gave letters of recommendation for me to apply to that firm. And I told them, hey, I got the offer, and they were all very happy for me. And then I told them, but I have some reservations. And that's the kicker, where I thought I thought my mentors would have been mad at me. I even called my school's counselors and told them that, hey, I have an offer in the middle of the pandemic. And like the counselor's office, admissions office across the country are like, oh, are graduates even being hired? And this one guy's turning down an offer. And believe it or not, none of them were angry at me. They were actually very supportive of me looking out for myself, first and foremost, that as much as I might be getting paid a lot of money, the idea that I'm going to have to work that many hours and I don't want to work that many hours because it's going to trade off with my passions and my hobbies. They actually totally understood that if I'm in a position where I can put myself first, I should. And what I mean, the position I'm in is that I may have gone through all those years of schooling, gotten 4 degrees in 7 years. Thanks to scholarships, money, and the help from my parents, I actually was able to graduate with no student loan debt. So that privilege actually allows me to actually put my mental health and put my comfort zone first and foremost when it comes to deciding whether or not I have to say yes to an offer or not.
Would it have changed your mind if you had student debt?
To some extent, I think it would have. And I think that's a silver lining. That's great that, hey, I acknowledge I had the privilege I have. But then the bad part that is that, hey, there's millions of other people in this country that do not have such privilege. And if it wasn't for debt, they would be choosing the jobs they want to work at. But the only reason so many people, including attorneys, including young lawyers, the only reason that they are working where they are working at is just to pay off the student loan debt. And as soon as that debt is paid off, they will seriously consider leaving whatever firm they're at.
So what did your family think about it? You're talking about mentors being very supportive. Obviously, your family helped you through school, through one or all degrees. What were their thoughts when you said, you know what, I'm going to turn this down?
Believe it or not everyone in the household was on the same page at the time. And I mean, primarily my parents. So my mom was actually quite surprised, asking, well, why turn that down? San Antonio is not that far of drive away. You can always visit every weekend. It's only 2 hours. It's not that bad. And for us living in Texas, anything that's like under 3 or 2 hour drive, it's considered a short drive for us. It really is. Like anywhere else in the country,
well, it's a huge state.
It is like you can drive from south on Brownsville and then go all the way north up to Lubbock or Amarillo. The sun will rise, the sun will set, but you'll still be stuck in goddamn Texas. So to my mom was like, it's a short drive. Well, why not go? You only have to be there for so long. It's not like you can be there forever. And the saying is true. Your first job is not your last job. And so she was just a bit confused, and she was not 100% understanding as to the reason as to why I wanted to stay was because I still wanted to continue my hobbies and my passions, primarily martial arts and dance. And she just couldn't understand as to why I would put my passions before my income. My dad, on the other hand, was kind of like, yeah, okay, whatever. It was kind of weird. I was like, wait, what do you mean whatever? It's like, I mean, I believe you. I trust that you know what you're doing. I mean, you're a lawyer now, right? Your decisions carry weight, and that includes decisions about yourself. And he's like, if you want to stay home and continue working in Houston, you find another firm, you go on your own, I'm here to support you. In the same way that he's always supported me through paying tuition, now it's the other way around where I'm helping him save his money because now I'm technically my dad's attorney. So it's kind of weird when my dad has been so supportive because he knows there's something in it for him too. So
yeah, well, they always say to have one lawyer, one doctor, one whatever in your family in case you need consultants. So, I mean, it sounds like it's working pretty well in the family business.
Oh, it is. Trust me.
So tell me a little bit more about these hobbies, or rather your passions, because a lot of times that kind of goes to the wayside when you're starting your career or even your business.
Right. So I'd say my first main passion that everyone knows me as, and this is why I'm called a Wushu Lawyer, is because I practice Chinese martial arts, or specifically contemporary Chinese martial arts, which we will refer to as Wushu. When people refer to traditional Kung Fu, then they will just call it Kung Fu. But if you're talking about contemporary martial arts and from the Chinese culture, then that's what I've been practicing since about October 2014. I remember the date because I started literally the week after I took my LSAT. I kept putting off joining my friend's martial arts club at U of H. I kept telling him, okay, I'll come. Then eventually I showed up for practice, and the rest is history. I immediately fell into love with it. One thing I like about Wushu is that whether you like to do combat or you don't want to do combat, there's a place for you in our sport. There's so many different varieties, whether it's from hand forms or doing weapons, or if you do want to do actual combat, there's so much variety, and there's a space for really everyone in Chinese martial arts. And that's why I've stuck with that martial arts or this extracurricular activity as opposed to anything else. When I was a kid, I played violin for 7 years. I was concertmaster in my orchestra when I was in high school. But when I started college, I left the violin. But now even though I started Wushu when I was in college and I graduated and become an attorney, I have not left Wushu and still stuck with me because doing martial arts, meeting people from around the country, competing around the country and here in Houston and training under my master and my fellow classmates, it's really become my second community. And Chinatown is essentially is my second home. I'm there like literally 3 or 4 times a week training in martial arts, but it's become not just something I do, but it's become part of my identity. Like you cannot separate me from doing Chinese martial arts. Like you just can't do it. So that's the first thing, the first passion I have.
Well, tell me a little bit about being in a community, if you can speak to the diversity of your group, because, and I don't know if they're mainly Chinese. And if that's the case, you mentioned to me pre-interview that you're
Actually,
South Asian.
yes.
And so how has that been integrating into a community where maybe, your skin's a little bit darker or you may have a little bit of different values?
That is true, right? I'm South Asian. Specifically, I'm Bengali. I'm not Indian or Pakistani. I get confused by that a lot. So I'm Bengali. And secondly, I'm Muslim. So whereas a lot of the other classmates actually, I mean, they are Chinese and they're either Buddhist or Christian, or some of them don't believe in any religion. Um, Surprisingly, it's not been a problem. It's not ever been a problem. They know what my religion is. So they know that when we go out to eat together, for example, they know that I cannot eat pork. I cannot drink alcohol. And there are certain places that I just will not visit. And they completely understand that. Like they don't tell me, okay, well, if you can't do this, you can't do that, then you can't be part of the school. That has never been the case. It's actually been the exact opposite. They've actually been very accommodating wherever we go, depending on my schedule is. For example, like Ramadan, which lasts an entire month during the year, they understand that, hey, during Ramadan, I may have to train differently, if at all. So, I can't eat or drink during the day when I'm fasting, but I can eat or drink at night. And they found ways to just accommodate that.
Yeah. And I always see your videos on weightlifting and it blows my mind. I'm just like, oh my goodness. How do you continue to push your body as you progress in the martial arts?
One thing that our master teaches us, or we call him Shifu, I always call him Shifu. Shifu teaches us that there's two sides to our training. The first is, yes, obviously the external part of our training, which is making sure we condition our body, that we eat the right foods and drinks. I personally actually take multiple supplements on the side. There's also some mental pushing that needs to happen. I mean, the kind of mental strength that you need to be able to, for example, squat. So, for example, right now, as of this week, I hit 305
Oh my
pounds
goodness.
on my squat and in my deadlift. And whereas like about a year ago, I was barely hitting like 130. That requires a lot of mental fortitude. And so Shifu has spent time on the side that even if you don't do Tai Chi as one of your styles, you have to learn how to, if not meditate, you have to learn how to breathe. You have to know how to not give up when you're in physical pain, because the kind of brain that teaches you how to withstand the pain when you're trying to get more flexible, like doing your splits, or the mental fortitude that you need to be able to do a heavier squat or deadlift or really any weighted exercise, is the same kind of mental fortitude that you need to be able to do wushu, to be able to last a form, or to be able to last in a round of combat. And it's the same mental fortitude that then carries over into my practice as an attorney, that I need the mental fortitude to be able to literally carry the metaphorical weight of all my clients' problems.
I was
So
just
for
going to
me, it's
say
all,
that. Yeah, there's a parallel between that. And that's a lot of weight. But talk to me more about this mental fortitude, because you do estate planning and that's no easy feat sometimes, because I think especially when a key or core relative passes away, like say a grandma who keeps a family together, it's almost like the crows come out, or, they're starting to pick and trying to figure out who gets what. And so why is estate planning so important, and how does the mental fortitude aspect apply to the work that you do?
when we talk about planning, that obviously means that we're taking certain steps ahead of time, meaning that we don't wait for the worst thing to happen, i.e., someone dying, or more specifically, dying when we don't expect them to die. Even though last I checked, death doesn't care about your calendar. If it's going to come, it's going to come. So it's helping families prepare ahead of time with the right sets of documents. So one is taking care of the will. So you mentioned about who gets what, when the crows come or the vultures come.
And maybe not, they may not be crows. I mean, maybe it's all equitable, but usually people that come into my practice have those difficulties. And especially, I think, to complement your work, grief adds quite a bit of complexity to
Yeah.
the distribution.
Yeah. When you pass away, you pass away. The people who are grieved are the ones that are left behind. It's not obviously the person that has
Yeah,
died.
absolutely.
So if you draft up a will, you make it very clear from the get-go as to who is getting what, and your wishes will be enforced by the court. Like there's no getting around that. So unless, and the very remote likelihood that someone can try to disprove that this will is fake, people are going to get what they're going to get, and they cannot really question it, saying, "Oh no, I deserve more. That person deserves less." Once that will is drafted and it's been signed and notarized, and that person has passed away, that's it. So you take away people's ability or their incentive to fight in the first place, because that's where that grief comes from. There's going to be sadness in the family when people don't get along to begin with. But if you draft up a will, it really doesn't matter as much whether or not people get along or not, because you've completely taken that decision out of their hands and you put it into your hands, even when you're no longer with us.
So usually when you're doing estate planning, and FYI, I've done my will and trust very early because I just see it as so important, especially when you have a family. But are the, I would say, beneficiaries, correct me, the exact term, but would you say that the beneficiaries are typically involved in the process?
Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. When it comes to drafting up a will, I actually do encourage people to talk with their loved ones about the will, not necessarily because of what their loved ones are going to get, but because of their actual responsibilities when you die. So one of the first things you have to figure out when you draft up your will is who is going to be the executor of your will. And the executor of your will may not be someone that's related to you. You can literally choose even your friend or your neighbor next door who is not going to get anything from your estate to be the executor of your estate, which means that it's their job, it's their responsibility to make sure the right people get X, Y, and Z things from your estate.
It's a really tough choice from experience because the person also has to agree to do it, right? And hopefully they're close to you. And you're saying, here, when I die, please execute my wishes. And that's a huge responsibility for someone to take.
Yeah. And that's deciding, hey, what's going to happen to your stuff, like your physical stuff, like your money, your bank accounts, your cars, your real estate, so on and so forth, and doing the proper formalities and the paperwork. That also means that you trust that person to know all of your dirty secrets as well as to everything you did during life. It's going to come up when your estate is opened up. And then the second thing is we discuss, okay, well, if you die and you leave behind minor children. So when I work with couples, a lot of them, some of them are literally recently married, less than 3 or 2 years married. Some of them have been married for only 10 and 15 years. I'm not working with too many elderly people yet, meaning that they have adult children. So a lot of my clients have minor children and they're not going to turn 18 anytime soon. So the next thing we had to discuss is, okay, who do you trust to raise your children if both you and your spouse die? And that is an even more important decision because you're literally having to think about a world where you are not getting to raise your little children anymore. You're not going to, get to see them graduate. You have to imagine such a world. And even that is a painstaking thought to have. I mean, the likelihood of it happening may not be very high, but it's a thought that I then have to introduce into my client's mind is, by the way, if you die before they turn adults, you're going to have to think about who's going to take care of them and who's going to love them as much as you did.
How do you get into that mental space to have those conversations? Because even as a therapist, I have to get in maybe a different mind frame to cope with that possibility. Death is not an easy thing to talk about for many people.
I actually try to avoid using certain words early in the conversation to consult. So I rarely try to use the words death or when you die. I might say, well, when you pass away or when you're no longer with us or when the inevitable happens. So I try to use certain words as opposed to others. You might consider them certain trigger words in the context of a will consult because it's very clear why the client's here. They're here to talk about a world where they're no longer around. So there's no point in me bringing up, hey, when you die, when you're no longer here. So that's the first thing. The second thing is asking them, hey, out of everyone in your life that you trust, who do you trust the most? And so I start talking the conversation with words like trust. And so it gets them to have more warm feelings of thinking about, hey, in this world, who do I truly love the most other than my own children? It might be your mom and dad. It might be your brother or your brother-in-law. We have to ask, who do you love? Who do you trust? Who do you think your children would trust? Who do your children love? So we try to use a lot of words with positive connotations when we are thinking about these documents, even though these documents are just words on paper, they carry weight and they carry thought and intent and effort.
So, one of the things that I wondered about is how do you help clients manage the anxiety and kind of all the ambiguity? Because hopefully they have people that they trust. But I'm thinking about perhaps a family that their relatives are back in another country and they don't really have immediate family. How do you walk them through those kinds of scenarios?
You might be worried that, if you die and you leave behind all these things or these children and there's no one else around in the country. I start telling them, hey, you might want to consider reaching out to your neighbors and start thinking more about where are you in this world right now. I know you're here to talk about your will and what the world's going to look like when you're no longer here, but that's why, and one thing that triggers a lot of people's anxiety is just thinking about death. I actually then steer the conversation to them thinking about where they are in their life right now and where is their meaning, where are their relationships right now, because where you are right now sometimes can really indicate what the world's going to look like when you're no longer here. So I actually then steer the conversation to someplace that's even more loving, which is, hey, where are your friends and family and what is your relationship with them like right now? Because you can't just be thrusting things on people but you want to make sure that things are in place. Well, you have to do that work right now. It's not enough for you to just talk to me as your attorney, pay me however much, I sign the documents there, we square it away and put it in a deposit box. I actually tell my clients, hey, over the next couple of weeks, I want you to spend some time talking with your family. I want you to talk with your family abroad. I want you to talk with your family here. If you don't know your neighbors, I want you to get to know your neighbors. If you don't know your boss that well, I want you to get to know your boss, because guess what? If you die before you retire, well, then you still have that 401k invested up. Or what if you still owe child support from a previous marriage? Your boss was the one cutting those checks to, taking a portion out to you to give to your previous spouse. What does your boss know about what you're doing in your estate planning? Sometimes it might be relevant to bring the boss in, sometimes it's not, but it's good to know where you stand with everyone who's a part of your life and what it would be like if you were to leave tomorrow, what kind of grief they would be in, but also what is their role when it comes to the things that which you own or the things which you are in possession or control over. That includes obviously your children.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously you have built a lot of mental fortitude to talk about these things because it isn't an easy process. So tell me more about how not only the martial arts, but we connected over K-pop and you coordinate some choreography and obviously look at the Blackpink concert, for instance.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
Which was good, but I just really wish it was in person. I've seen them live,
Yeah,
and it's really sad that we can't see them live.
I'm really sad we couldn't see them in person last year, and maybe not even this year.
Yeah, so we drove from San Francisco to LA, and then dropped the kids off at school, and when we came back, and it was just like a few hours later, they called and said, "Oh, she's very tired," and I was like, "Oh man, I'm winning the Parent of the Year award like for this one." But they had an awesome experience. I mean, how many parents would let you go to a Blackpink concert, right? But and they're great in school, so. But yeah, good. Tell me a little bit about how that passion has really integrated with the others.
So I'd say that, when I did weightlifting, it was mainly just to, for example, help my martial arts in terms of just making me stronger. Because one thing in Wushu that makes it slightly different from traditional Kung Fu is that we have, think of traditional Kung Fu, like you see in the Shaolin monks do, and then mix in gymnastics. The fact of the matter is that when we specifically talk about Wushu, we are talking about a sport which is inspired by centuries, if not millennia, of Chinese martial arts traditions. But Wushu itself has really only been around since about a little bit after 1949. And so gymnastics is actually part of Wushu to some extent. So that involves a lot of jumping. And in order to be able to jump very high, you need to have strong legs and a strong torso and core. That's why I did weightlifting. So that's why I squat 300 something pounds, because I have to lift myself up to the air and stay there for a long time. But that only develops my strength. It didn't always develop in as much as it developed part of my mental fortitude, but I always felt there was a third leg missing. Like trying to imagine making a stool or a chair with only 2 legs. You probably couldn't do it. You always feel like you need at least 3 legs for a chair or a stool. So there was always something feeling imbalanced within me. By my luck, it just so happened that the dance studio that had been open for a few months next to my martial arts school teaches K-pop. So I went for one class and I was
Oh,
just
cool.
like, this has been here the whole time next door. What? Honestly, part of martial arts, my training, I was always training for the next competition, which meant that I was always training to meet a certain criteria or to finish a certain choreography by a certain deadline, because the competitions are at certain deadlines throughout the year. And eventually pushing myself, okay, I want to try out for the national team. And as fun as that is, that then felt like I'm associating obligations with my practice of martial arts. So that brought some stress on me. But when the pandemic hit, all the competitions got canceled. And to some extent, I suddenly felt like I was free from all the obligations of having to train for a competition and putting on meal prep and so on by a certain point in time. So I had this,
unstructured time.
Yeah, I had this extra time to go to try something else. I was like, okay, let me try dance. It turns out that not only was dance good for my self-esteem, because every single week I was around all these girls, all these ladies, these beautiful. I'm saying I'm the only guy, even still now, really in my K-pop dance class, and it's actually been great. I went from being simply a neighbor to this dance studio to actually being one of them. I actually see all these girls. Some might think, okay, he's just going there just so he can hit on them and just kind of get in and infiltrate. But that's not the case at all. I actually have come to see my teachers as almost like my aunts, or like almost like my Chinese mother, and then seeing all my classmates as almost like my sisters, or as like my Chinese sisters, and seeing that, hey, we're all here for something that's very beautiful, something that's very simple. When we train there at that studio, we're learning a song to dance to a song because we want to, because we love to do it. We're not training for some competition or to audition for some dance team. We're doing it just because we want to. And it's a great way to spend our time a few nights during the week. And so learning the choreography was just great for me mentally on that aspect. But then it also turned out that a lot of the movements, which actually have some crossover with Wushu, I was training certain movements in both contexts, and then doing some moves which are not crossover at all. Actually was great for some of the pain I was having in my hips and in my knees. That fluidity gave me an extra range of motion that I just wasn't having at my martial arts school. So it's almost like dance is the sky, and then Wushu was the earth. The irony is that the style I do in Wushu, which is mainly Southern style, is actually associated with earth. And then dance, I just feel so much more free. Like, I don't have other people judging me. It's a very non-judgmental, it's a very safe space. So it felt very liberating to do that. If I make mistakes, it's okay. And so it felt very freeing.
Yeah, it sounds like you've created these mini or subunit families. And so I'm wondering, especially because you are very outgoing, you're well-spoken, and I'm sure that it's not hard to make friends. But for other people that may be a little bit more shy, what kind of advice do you give them to kind of find a supportive crew that they may fit into?
For the first thing I would ask them is, well, what are your personal interests? I mean, forget the interests of the few friends that you have. The first thing is, what are your personal interests? The second thing is to figure out, how do you best learn to do something, to get better at that interest. So if your interest is in painting or in dance or whatever it may be, how do you best learn that? Do you first learn that skill really well in a group setting, or is it one-on-one with a teacher, or in a very much more smaller group setting? Once you do that, go find someone who will help you develop that skill. And I think that's where those people should start, is trying to figure out what you like, not what you're good at, what you like. What do you like? And then finding someone who can help you develop that into a skill, not into a side hustle, not into a money generating machine, into something that you like and you just want to be better at it purely for the sake of it. And I think once you do that, you slowly open up.
Yeah, and I think that's how we connected, was really having shared interests. And I think that's a huge thing that I always bring people back to is, talk about the interest, or like lead someone else to talk about, their interest as well, because people will want to share and they are looking for some sort of connection. Even during the pandemic, right? We have found more than ever that humans need humans and actual interaction,
Yes.
not just through like screens and seeing each other's social medias and stuff like that, but there's something qualitatively different about being in person at something. And like we just talked about, even at concerts, right? For not only the artists, but especially for fans, because there's a different level of engagement there that both are feeding off of. I think the positive aspects of fandoms are that people really, really want to support the artist and love the music. So, I mean, obviously, I'm a huge ARMY. I love BTS. I have my BTS pillow here.
Oh, really? Yeah, yeah.
um, but I think their message is so amazing, and they seem like really good people. And I think it sounds like, you really resonate with having supportive people around you, which is amazing. So tell me a little bit about the lessons that you've learned in starting your own business, because I feel like with the pandemic, people have moved in the direction of being more entrepreneurial or having side hustles or whatever you call it. What have you learned so far?
I realized that even when you don't know who they are or you don't think that they do, there are people cheering you on, believe it or not. So when you tell someone, hey, by the way, I started my own law practice. I don't even have my website up yet or anything, but I am doing these things. These are the areas of law I want to practice. Immediately, when I tell my mentor lawyers this, they're like, oh, you decided to go solo. None of them told me, hey, why didn't you take up that offer? They're like, okay, you started your own practice? No problem. I'll send you clients. I'll give you referrals. And automatically, that's literally how it's been. I have some mentors that they'll give me one referral, maybe every couple of weeks or once a month consistently. I have another friend. He literally sends me, at times feels like I get more referrals than I know what to do with, which is great. And like literally every week, it's like at least one or two referrals every single week. And that's been majority of my revenue has actually not been from helping my dad out with his businesses. It's actually been my friends who know that I'm a solo attorney, that know I've opened up my own law firm, saying, hey, you open up your own law firm, we're not going to let you sink, we're going to help you swim. And then not just swim, we're going to help you build a boat so you can sail as far as you want, and we'll send you referrals consistently without a doubt of it. I don't have to pay them for these referrals. They just know that, hey, times are tough, but if we all stick together, we're going to do just fine. But if you let people know what you're doing and what you're working on, what your projects are, your side hustle, you will be surprised as to who your cheerleaders are coming out of the woodwork. So do not discount that.
And how do you balance, maintaining these personal relationships and not self-promoting? And I'm saying that from maybe a new entrepreneur that doesn't have as many connections, but like reaching out to their small network.
I think that's a very good question. And so I think one thing is that before I tell people that I have my own business, people already knew. So it's almost like I did the work for myself already. Because throughout the years I was in law school, I was always posting about, oh my gosh, law school is like this, law school is that. Oh, guys, whenever I hit certain milestones and becoming an attorney, I would always post about them. So people knew kind of where I was, even if they didn't know all the nitty gritty details. Letting people know bits and pieces of my journey, they already knew that I was an attorney. But when I meet people whom I don't know, or when I people who know me, but they don't know that I'm an attorney yet, maybe it's a friend that I haven't met in 5 or 6 years, I casually bring up, or I kind of either intentionally or unintentionally let something slide. Say, hey, by the way, I can only meet for so long. I have a meeting with a client in about an hour or two. It was like, oh, clients? You have a client for what? Oh, I brought up my own law firm. I almost bring it up like it's an afterthought, like almost as if I wasn't going to mention it and I forgot to mention it, and then I'm mentioning it now that I opened my own law firm, without the first sentence being at the dinner or the lunch table saying, by the way, I've started my own law firm. Can you send me some clients? No, 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 no. You have to think about how to let things happen just naturally when it comes to bringing these things up. Otherwise, people will genuinely think that the only time that you want to meet with them is just to get a sale out of them. And you don't want that.
Absolutely. No, that's really great advice for people. And I think especially you can provide a lot of inspiration for up and coming lawyers as well, because, and I don't know how much your school went into how to run your own practice or your business. I know for me, they mentioned private practice, but it was all a learning process for me. And actually I learned a lot from Selling the Couch podcast, is really gave me a template, 5 years ago, in terms of how to do certain things, how to manage your taxes, and there's all these little nuances. So tell maybe up and coming lawyers or any practitioners, what do you wish you would have known back then to help you in the present?
So I'm actually glad that one of my mentors during law school told me this before I graduated. So it actually wasn't too much of a whiplash. And that is that you are in law school or med school or grad school, whatever, to learn as much as you can, as much as you need, simply to pass the licensing exam that the government has said that you need. but it will never be enough to truly prepare you for what's going to be like when you actually go and out and practice law or medicine. So I'm glad I was already actually told that up front. And that's what I would tell young lawyers is that like, look, you can get some good, decent experience in law school. You can get as good of a grade as you can in all your classes in law school. And you should study hard. You should get as good of a grade as you can, but it will never truly prepare you. And that's not a bad thing. No one actually truly expects you to know everything like you should when you get into law school. And in fact, the only people who mistakenly think that you should know everything are actually going to be some of your clients. So I'd actually give this as advice to also future clients or people that think that they might need an attorney of some sort. Don't think that your attorney is going to absolutely know everything. You are actually paying your attorney to not only know some things, but to actually research things that which you don't know, but they themselves don't know. And you're asking them to spend their time to have to learn things for you. That's why it's called practice, is because you're always just learning, you're always making mistakes, and then you're learning as you go along. That's the nature of any licensed professional. And so once a young lawyer learns that, it actually takes off the stress, knowing that, hey, I may have done great or not great in law school, but it's okay. It's always a learning process. And so I've been very grateful that a lot of the older attorneys, even opposing counsel, even judges have been very understanding that I'm a young attorney and that I'm trying, and they completely understand it. They don't hold it against me to not know something. The only thing someone can hold against you is for not trying to learn something when the opportunity arises that you clearly have to learn something.
School is really helpful for learning many things. And at the same time, there's a reality aspect to things that you do learn, quote unquote, on the job. I mean, for me, I really wish, looking back, that it was more of like a PhD/MBA, because I mean, I've always been very entrepreneurial in general. And I was debating whether to go into like industrial, organizational, psych, or clinical. But, if I went IO, I couldn't really see patients. But this way I see patients and I can do business psychology, so to speak. But I think, what you're speaking to overall is really learning new skills and looking into things that you never would have thought you would be interested in, but now pique your interest later in life.
Yeah, I like law school is actually quite short in of itself. Like for some law schools, they offer accelerated programs where you can get your JD in as short as just 5 semesters. I hear rumors of some places that claim to finish in 4, which I highly doubt. But yeah, law school or getting your JD, if you go full time, is normally 3 years. That is too short of a time to truly learn everything, especially because the law in of itself is constantly changing. Like there's always new laws being passed. So when people say, "Hey, how do you know what the law is?" I'm like, excuse me, the law just changed yesterday. Give me some chance to catch up."
Yeah. And not only is the law changing, but the interpretation of the law is changing. And so that's a whole nother ball game and can of worms I don't want to open up. But, I just think that it's very complex.
Yeah. I mean, like it can change like so often. And we want to tell ourselves that the law is something like a science in the sense that it can be studied objectively, it can be interpreted objectively. But then you run into the reality that because there's so many different people trying to interpret the law or trying to practice the law, there really can be different outcomes under the same laws. And that's the reality of living in the country that we live in. But that's actually been the case throughout history.
So, I mean, obviously you're super knowledgeable. I'm super impressed. Not that I'm not like super surprised about it. So for those that are looking for a lawyer or even in your area, what should they look for or ask if they're a good fit?
They should ask whether or not that attorney has practiced this area of law before or has been practicing it. And number 2, whether or not that attorney themselves thinks that they are truly capable of learning this area of the law that which they haven't done before but are willing to learn. The third thing you can ask an attorney is, hey, if you are doing this area of law, or if you're not, but you're not comfortable trying to learn or do this for me, are you comfortable giving me a referral? And honestly, you can sometimes tell a lot about an attorney's character and where they are at in their practice by how willing they are to give you a referral, even if it's to an attorney that's competing against them in their business.
Yeah, I definitely encourage people to shop around for providers, even because it might not be a good fit, and that's okay. But even for me, when I refer out, I work from the mindset of or perspective, Would I send a family member to this provider, right? Because there's a ton of providers, lawyers, psychologists out there, but I think when people are able to refer people to, trusted colleagues, it really makes a difference.
Yeah, because then you really think about, hey, this person, this professional is more concerned about me getting the services at the quality I need and the way that I get them than they are about their own bottom line. Which, some people, they got a bottom line, they got to meet it. If they have the quota, they got to meet it. But they're more concerned about what I need right now. That puts in my mind that even if this is not the attorney that does this thing for me right now, I am definitely going to come back to this attorney again the next time I do need something for something that which they are able to provide, or which if I need a referral next time, I'm going to be coming to this attorney. And then on the flip side, all the attorneys, when they learn that the reason that they're getting a bunch of referrals is because of you and because of your ethics and because you care more about the clients than you are about your bottom line, those attorneys are going to be referring people back to you. So it goes both ways, right? There's enough of the pie to go around for everyone. And we need to have an abundance mindset when it comes to the practice of law or of any kind of practice, as opposed to a scarcity mindset where it's like, I got to get all the clients that I need and I need to make sure that I'm the only one that gets them.
And honestly, that's a way to burn out because for me this year, my big thing is setting boundaries for myself because luckily, I have an overflow and it's just kind of like, I have a hard time saying no because I'm like, I really want to help this person. And at the same time, I think as providers, we really need to watch our burnout rates and our mental health as well.
Yeah. And I think I've been mostly doing a very good job of knowing about burnout because I'd say my greatest asset is actually listening to the experiences of others that have come before me, learn from their mistakes, and actually learn how to avoid the mistakes that they had.
Yeah, I love it. So tell us what's next for you.
So obviously, pretty soon, I'm hoping that either during or after Chinese New Year, I'll finally make it very well known to the world that, hey, I'm going public with my firm. Because up until now, I've been doing pretty okay with my business, just almost purely through word of mouth or through messenger. But I think the first thing that's going to happen with the next few months or weeks is that I'll finally go public and I'll finally have the website officially set up and all those basic things that some would argue that I should have done from the get-go, but I haven't really needed or even wanted probably up until now. I think it's about time the world fully knows what I've been doing behind the scenes and going public about it. The only reason I haven't been going public about it, I think, is also because business has been pretty okay. The minute I go public, I'm afraid that there might be it'll be like taking away the finger out of the hole in the dam, right? Once I do that, the dam's going to burst and some people will really want my services then. So that's kind of been something I've been afraid of, but I think I've been prepping myself to handle that in case. Yeah. The other thing is that I've been working with a print shop. And so I've been willing to talk a little bit more about this now, is that finally, one thing I love about Wushu is actually the clothes that we wear. And so
yeah, it looked fantastic. The 22 pictures that you sent me.
Sorry, yeah, it was weird. I was like, oh gosh, why are they all separate emails? It all should have gotten one, but that's I'll work on how I send pictures.
I kid. But yeah. I was like, whoa, my watch is going crazy. Who is this?
Yeah. But those silks I had, those were custom made. I had those. So basically, the story of my Wushu silks right now, which I had made from China, about a couple years ago, about in 2015, I went to an Islamic convention in Houston. It's normally held every single year in person. The pandemic obviously took it away last year and went virtual. But in 2015, I went to this one convention here in Houston, and I met this one man. His name is Haji Nur Din Mi Guangjiang. Interesting, the first half of his name is in Arabic, and the last half of his name is in Chinese. That's because he is what's known as a Hui Muslim, Hui. He is of an ethnic minority in China that is actually, the only difference between them and the Han majority is that they're Muslim. So they look exactly like all the other Han Chinese. They speak the same language and everything, but they're all Muslim. They believe in Allah and His last messenger and so on. So just like me, the only thing I wanted from him, it turns out, is because he is also a world famous calligrapher, and there was something I really wanted him to draw for me, because he practices this art of calligraphy where he writes in Arabic, but still looks and feels very Chinese. If you compare that against Middle Eastern calligraphy, you can't tell that it's exactly the same style because they're not. He's writing Arabic that looks like and feels like it's Chinese. So he can draw a word in Arabic and then draw it into the shape of like a peacock or a boat or a building or a flower. And he can turn a word or a series of words or sentences into these beautiful designs. So I encourage everyone to look up Haji Noor on Google and you'll see his artworks. And I asked him, can you write my name in the shape of a phoenix? And he did it in less than a minute. So he wrote out my full name, Muhammad Wahid Ullah. And I had him put it on a scroll, and that scroll's been sitting in my dresser drawer for the better half of about 5 years. So when I started my firm, everyone said, okay, well, if you're going to start a firm and you need business cards, you're going to need a logo. Because every lawyer, every law firm has a logo. And I'm like,
sure,
what's my logo going to be? I'm like, wait a minute. I have this in the dresser. So I pulled out the scroll, and it's just right in front of me. So this picture, which you can definitely just direct people to my social media eventually, and they'll be able to see it. It has my name, and it's in the shape of a phoenix. That same phoenix is now on my Wushu silks. And I'm like, wait a minute. I've always wanted to get custom silks. I'll just put my logo on my silks, and my silks will, in it themselves, even at competition, advertise the firm.
That's so smart.
Yeah. So even if I'm traveling overseas, people will see my logo and they'll know that it's me. It's the Wushu Lawyer. It's that guy from America. It's that guy from Houston. It's him. So it's on my silks. So I had a local designer here in Houston put that design, and we made some business cards. And then she also designed the templates for the clothing, because you have to send a template if you want to make a custom silk to the people over in China. So she made the custom silk. I'm actually the first person that she's ever designed Wushu silks for, the uniform for. So it was a great experience for her. And she managed, for someone that's never done it before, she made it look like she's done it 1,000 times before, to be making this mix of Chinese culture, but also Islam in one outfit. So we sent it to China, and a couple of weeks later, they sent me my custom silks. And then we had the photo shoot done with my friend who's a photographer. That same friend who actually brought me to Wushu in the first place and invited me to the club back at UVA. So it's all come full circle. It really has.
It's amazing.
And so now this is where the next phase in my story is that I'm hoping soon in the next couple of weeks or months that we're going to be making custom made track jackets. So this very same jacket that you see me wearing right now, it's actually from my days being on the University of Houston Wushu Kung Fu club. And we would wear it to competitions. We would wear it to practice. It's great to practice in. I can just stand up a little bit. And I don't know if you can see the logo on the back of it.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. There you go. And so I was like, wait a minute. I'm going to basically make track jackets just like from my days in college. So now when people wear the jackets, and the jackets are literally going to look like as if you took the silks and put them in track jacket form. So it's going to have the phoenix in the front. It's going to have my logo in the back. It's going to have all the stylings, all the colors and everything. So that way, when you wear my jacket, it's almost as if you're wearing my silks. So I'm hoping
that's amazing
when that happens. So I always like to think of that. The reason I chose the phoenix as my mascot is because I do believe that we will all live and we will all leave this world. We will all die, but we will all be resurrected. Like, as a Muslim, I do believe that, this is not the only life we have. There is a day where we become resurrected and we will come back to life, just as the phoenix comes back to life even after its death and it becomes reborn. But the phoenix is also a being of fire. And I truly believe that it's my place in life, my place in the world to, tender my own fire, cultivate my own fire, and to spread that fire to others. So as every person gets a jacket, it's as if I'm spreading my flame, in the same way that the Olympic torch, when it gets passed on, it's as if you're lighting the torch of the next person.
That is fantastic. And, how much would your clients appreciate getting a custom jacket? I mean, obviously you'll build that into the price, but, or not, I don't know. But how fantastic would that be to have your estate planning and then you get a jacket and then have free promo,
Yeah, I get to that point. Yeah. For now, it's probably going to be where people are going to I'm going to need a lot of my friends to help me make up the bulk orders. I mean, you know how it is getting jackets and shirts and stuff. So I'm going to definitely need my friends to help, pitch in to get the first order through. But then once the first orders come through and people see it, I know more people will want it. I'm even considering setting up a Shopify store where people can just buy it, whether they're a client or not. And they can just pay however much it's going to cost. to make it. So I've decided to work with a local print shop. I don't want to work with custom ink because I'd rather give back to the local Houston community because a lot of my clients themselves are business owners here in Houston. And those same clients that, they're paying me money to do whatever for their business, those are the same clients I'm patronizing their businesses like every single week, but a very well-known effort. So even if people around the world search me up, they'll see that I'm not just the Wushu Lawyer. I'm Houston's very own Wushu Lawyer because I very much do love my city.
Absolutely. Well, you're doing amazing things. And, if you can kind of lead us out with maybe a word or a phrase of wisdom, what would you say?
I'd say this, just remember, no matter how big the weight is, you can always lift it up. Even if it means you have to reach out. You'll be surprised who wants to be your support. And in return, learn to be everyone else's warrior as well. Because again, don't just learn how to just be a lawyer. Be like the Wushu Lawyer.
That is amazing. That's like your commercial. You just filmed it.
Yeah, I have been thinking about how to let people know. It's like, hey, I'm not just, if you put the words warrior and lawyer together, it still sounds like warrior, WAR-YER.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, Momo, thank you so much for joining us today. And, you're just an amazing person. And I'm so glad we got to sit down one-on-one after so many months of kind of communicating through Instagram and with our shared interest.
Thank you so much. Yeah, for sure. And so as we lead out, I actually want to teach you one last thing. So whenever we begin class or end class in Wushu, we always start and end class with the salute. You may have seen it. It's the fist and the palm just like this. So just do that. So it's bow out. Ami Tofo.
Ami Tofo.
Thank you. All right. Thank you so much, Stephanie. I'm so glad to have been here and be able to talk with you tonight.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to the Color Success Podcast. Listen, like, subscribe on all major streaming platforms, YouTube, IG, and if you want exclusive content, you can join our Patreon. All links can be found at colorofsuccesspodcast.com.